All right, we are back talking the ramifications of some coaching changes on FSU football recruiting. I'm Ben Spicer, joined by Michael Langston. Michael, we did not get to hear from you yesterday. I think this is the
Yeah,
first time you've come on Warchant TV since the news of the coaching staff changes. So,
yeah.
just initial thoughts on the dismissal of Adam Fuller, Alex Atkins, and Ron Dugans.
Yeah, it was like I was getting on my first flight back from I was in the O'Hara Chicago airport when it happened. I was communicate with Matt, and they're telling me what's happening, and but I was like, my initial thing was like, are any of the three surprised? No, because I mean, one, you're 1-9. So when you're 1-9, or even close to that situation, um, your coordinators probably have to go, and then obviously a position coach that's really hasn't worked out for FSU. So I think all three of those were expected. I think probably the one that surprised me, if I was surprised by any of them, it'll be just Fuller, because that was the group that I felt like have been the best group as far as you're comparing offense or defense. They've kept them in a lot of games, but there's also a lot of situational stuff that was really poor throughout the year. But I don't think any of them shocked me. But I think it was needed. I said this last night on a post on the PRBN Tribal Council that I think this is something that they need to do. It's a good first step. I don't think it's going to be probably the last, but I think it's a good starting point when you raise what the standards are at FSU, and you address it and say, hey, this isn't close to what FSU is. So I think holding themselves accountable and seeing some accountability, because I think every week everyone's been waiting on this pop. I thought it would be sooner. I actually thought it would be probably around right after the Miami game, but I think at this point it got to a point where, hey, this got to get done and move forward. And I think it's actually good when you're going into the final two games. You have Charleston Southern. You obviously have a bye week, Charleston Southern and Florida. I think it's good to just kind of see what guys. And I think everything's on the table. Evaluation, like, it might not be popular, but I think everyone, from a everyone's standpoints, from a coaching, I think people are coaching for if they're going to be there or not, and that concludes everybody. And yeah, I know I get the money and all that stuff, but at the same time, it's like the standard doesn't change when it's FSU. So you have to address every single thing that's not working, whether that's all the way to the top or other spots. But I think you have to fix it all now, because if you don't, you're not going to be able to grow and go where you need to go, because this is not even close, not even the same universe of what FSU standard should be, and the product, and what you expect, and the expectations of what it should be. So I think this is a very big, important, really strong step with the firing of three guys, and it's hard, man. People are asking me like, "Are you excited?" I'm like, I'm not excited, because I mean, it need to be done, but I mean, these are still people. I mean, these are still people I have really good relationships with, and I feel for all three of these guys. But at the same time, business is business, and the product has to matter in what you do, and if you're going to grow and go anywhere, I think these moves had to be made.
Well, we're going to talk about Ron Dugan's wide receivers coach in this video. Before we get into that and wide receiver recruiting, I did want to ask because with Alex Atkins, it seems like he was so integral, especially in that offensive line
Yeah,
recruiting. Obviously, his relationships with Solomon Thomas, Peyton Joseph,
yeah.
and the two other guys that are committed as well. Just how costly is that losing him, and what do you think that does, especially in the offensive line in terms of keeping guys committed in the 2025 class?
Well, I've said it from the start that it's going to be challenging if you went that direction. But I've also said recruiting should be second nature to what FSU needs. Coaching moves and decisions and what their product has to be the number one thing. That's why I say all three of these are vital. I have a story coming up on the wide receiver position. I also have a story on just the ramifications and the impact of, you have to get the coaches right, and these are vital hires for Mike Norvell. But as far as Alex, yeah, all of them are close with him. I will drop a little nugget on here, guys, that Matt will have something on Solomon. I think he just spoke with him shortly ago, so he will have a story coming up. I get the sense it's positive. But I think the main thing, main point I would say, both for the offensive line commits that they have, and also just overall the commits and even targets. I think a lot of these recruits, a majority of them, if not all, are taking a patient approach of they want to see who they hire and then go from there. Because this, I know how the fans feel that they're not really sold on Mike, but a lot of these recruits, including the offensive line commits and the commits overall in the general, they really believe in what he's done, his vision. That hasn't changed. I haven't seen that slow down as far as belief in the vision. So I think that's strongly there. I think we saw that yesterday with Mario Nash's tweet, the one he put out about, "Hey, I'm committed at this time." And then I think got a similar message from Solomon. I think Daniel Lewis, that's a more interesting one because Florida's still pushing. Florida just stated that they're going to keep Napier. So there's a more, I guess, a little bit more stability, but he also loves FSU. So I think it's really who they hire and how the recruits connect and the offensive line recruits connect and commits is going to be a big deal of where this goes because I mean, that's really what it comes down to. If they're comfortable with this guy, whoever it is, whatever direction you go, I think that's really going to be the linchpin that we're watching. The firings are important, but the hirings are even more important of what you're going to do to fix it and the different guys and different philosophies of how where you go from here. But I think early on, it's cautiously optimistic, and as far as just that, at the very least, it seems like the offensive line commits, at least so far, is that they're taking a patient approach of seeing who they hire and how their connection is. So I think these last 2 weekends, we're going to see a lot of visits because I think a lot of kids are going to want to get there, whether they hire one before or if it happens, later in the season. I think they still want to see kind of what's the plan and what they're going to do. Certainly, our guys like Gene and Ira and Corey are all the team guys are all over just what choices there will be and what options and hot boards and stuff like that. But overall, the feel with the offensive line has been cautiously optimistic. I'd look at it that way of right now, because that's kind of your hope, like going into that, right? Like you want to see like them give them a chance, and that's why I think it was more telling if like if somebody was going to get fired, and like I said, I love all these coaches, but it would be Dugan's when you look at all three of those receiver commits. They all left. Not only did they leave, they committed probably in a 2 week span or 3 week span to the other school that they were in the picture for. So they weren't even giving FSU another chance. Whereas look at the offensive line where they're at least giving to see who's going to be there. So I think if you're looking at each position, that was the one that to me had to happen for sure. But I thought that was telling when you saw all three of those ended up at RE schools. I mean, you have Malik Clark, who ended up coming to South Carolina, Dalen McCutcheon. I think a few weeks later, after he decommitted from FSU, he committed to Texas, and then certainly CJ Wiley last week, committed to Georgia. Even though Texas A&M had a little buzz going, but Georgia was the team we always heard. But I mean, I think that's in me following this stuff. I think that's a big deal when kids are immediately, or not immediately, we're just in a week spans, committing to another school. I think that says a lot about, hey, you definitely move forward, and then obviously the player development, which we'll get into when we break down the receivers, stuff. But I think overall, everything with these moves had to be made. But that wide receiver part that really sticks out to me because the other positions, even with Fuller, you didn't have that stuff, and yeah, there was limitations to what Fuller did from a recruiting standpoint, but from a football standpoint, he brought certainly a lot as far as to the table. But to me, that wide receiver position just really just stands out like a sore thumb of just the high school recruits just immediately going somewhere else.
So where does FSU kind of turn from here? I know there were several guys that were on
Yeah,
visits over the last couple weeks. What's kind of the outlook at receiver, and is there any chance for one of those three commits maybe to reconsider FSU down the road, or do you think that ship has already kind of sailed?
I don't think it's sale. I think Javion Boggs, he's put up some cryptic tweets just on after he visited FSU. I talked to a few people around Javion as far as the impact of Dugans, and it didn't feel like it was like some major shift. I think he's seriously with FSU and whoever they hire if he's comfortable with him, I think there's a very good chance you could see a flip there based on the early returns I get. Now, I gave my wrap of that weekend, so I think he's very engaged still with FSU and what they're doing, and I think a lot of the recruits and even targets we haven't talked about, whoever is hired, I think you're going to see some good buzz about the wide receiver position as far as it's somebody that has some strong credentials and someone that these recruits believe in. I think you might see some unique targets emerging in there. But I think Boggs is the guy that I consistently have circled, and I think that's one that there's certainly, regardless of what happened yesterday, I think that's definitely one that I think FSU is a very real factor for. I think Tay Gesley out of commitment to Florida, out of Jacksonville, that's another one to keep an eye on because he really was engaged. And before this Dugans thing went down, I think he was really just okay. Now I got a decision to make of what I'm going to do. So I think he's seriously competent because, like I said, FSU likes him at receiver. Assuming whoever the new coach is, they still like him, then that's one to certainly keep an eye on. Those are kind of the two, Ben, that I've really circled that I feel like they're attainable for FSU based on the principles of they don't really have star-studded cash yet. I think the other thing is there's a lot of talent in this wide receiver room if you look across the board, but you need to see the development and what this guy, whoever it is, can do with these guys because there's a lot of talent. I mean, Hyken Williams is very talented. Certainly, this young class they got last year, Elijah Moore, B.J. Gibson, all those Camden Fryer, those guys are all very talented players, and you already have some that are already in there that can certainly help you in that room. So there's a lot still to work with, and then who knows what you can bring in of whoever the guy is. You might have ties to certainly somebody from the portal that you feel like you swoop in and get. So they can definitely shift this room, or shift this product of what we're seeing on the field because it's not just like to me, it's not just like, oh, it's the drops and people mention the drops every week. It's just they're not you're not seeing explosive plays from these receivers. They're not getting open, to help these young quarterbacks out. Like that's what I see when I watch it. And certainly I was there, had a great view at the Notre Dame game, and it's just like you consistently haven't seen that. We've seen issues with edges on the edges when they have to block. There's missed blocks, and it just there's a combination of a lot of things. So if you can get a certainly a really good addition as far as a receiver coach that understands the development of young talent, because that's been my biggest complaint. Ben and everyone knows that. Like my evaluation of player development, seeing young guys. I mean, I went through and researched a lot. Like just using Miami and Florida, both of them had guys that were young that were making impacts, whereas FSU is young as stars like Hakeem Williams, and he still kind of struggled to get a foot on making that impact. Whereas other schools, they're not having that issue. So I think if you get somebody that certainly can bring that out with the young player development, I think this could shift pretty quickly. Now the product itself as a whole with everything, that might take a year or two or so, or maybe longer. But I think with the receiver room, if you get the right guy, and certainly you add the right offensive coordinator when you get to that point, accommodate those guys. I think that's also the key. You have to find somebody that they connect with each other. The dots connect with each one, whereas the offense coordinator connects with what the wide receiver wants to do, and it meshes with what Mike's kind of vision is as far as the offense. So I think overall, certainly I don't think the wide receiver fix will be as long as maybe the other problems.
All right, this feels like a good time to let you know about the
Yeah.
promo we have going over on warchant.com for new subscribers. And there's no promo code necessary for this. $1 for 7 days of access, then 50% off your first year at warchant.com. And Michael can tell you we're going to have a lot of things coming here
Yeah.
over these next few weeks. So definitely want to make sure you can take advantage of that special. What do you got coming up on the premium recruiting board that fans can look out for?
Yeah, obviously that Solomon Thomas feature, not me, but I'll shout out my boy Matt. He's got a good one with that, and then obviously we're going to track down some other guys because we know the Tramel Jones saga that's going on. That I'm pretty uncertain about that. Doesn't really feel great as far as that. So Carter Smith might be a guy that they go after. That former Michigan commit. That something either me or Matt will work on. And then as I mentioned from the outset, I have an article on the wide receiver position. I really focus on the needs of what they have, what needs to be. Whoever they bring in, these qualifications I think need to be something that they look for, that their edge in recruiting that'll help them. Didn't stay away from the team stuff, more so just recruiting impact of how they would help this program. And then two, I did another one on the recruiting impact. Just focus on, for those that hadn't seen, man, go to the PRB. Matt did an incredible job with the recruit reactions. There's a lot of good recruit reactions. Kind of highlight some stuff, and then highlight just recruiting aspect of just the pulse of recruiting, of what's going on there, and just kind of where you go from here. So I got those two things coming up. I know Matt's probably got a few more things. Team stuff, we got the best team in the world. These guys are killing it. I know they're going to have probably hot boards and specific options of what's going on.